Good morning, gentlemen of the press. I'm here to address the press today as the president of Kagote. My dear Ogoni people, gentlemen of the press, it is with deep sense of responsibility, respect for constitutional authority, and commitment to the peace, unity, and development of Ogoniland that I, Chief Lesi Mao, the president of Kagote, the apex cultural organization of Ogoni people, wish to address you today on the several burning issues as it relates to oil resumption that might lead to crisis in Ogoniland. Our appreciation to the federal government. The Ogoni Dialogue Committee, ODC, was inaugurated by the federal government in January 2025 with the important mandate of engaging the Ogoni people in good faith towards achieving a durable resolution of the issues surrounding the resumption of oil production in Ogoniland, while rebuilding trust and strengthening relationship between the Ogoni people and the federal government of Nigeria. We acknowledge and deeply appreciate the commitment demonstrated by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFRO, towards addressing the long-standing concerns of the Ogoni people, the establishment of the dialogue process, and the President's decision to entrust its coordination to the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribado, CON, as the chief negotiator on the part of government, demonstrate the seriousness with which the federal government approached the Ogoni question and its desire to promote reconciliation, peace, equity, transparency, and sustainable development. We particularly recognize the integrity and distinguished public service record of the National Security Advisor and believe that the dialogue process as conceived by the federal government represents a genuine opportunity to achieve lasting peace and a mutual beneficiary outcome for both the Ogoni people and the federal government. It is precisely because we support this initiative and desire its success that we consider it necessary to draw attention to certain developments which, if left unaddressed, may undermine public confidence in the process. Our concerns are therefore not directed against the federal government, the President, the National Security Advisor, or legitimate objective or responsibility resuming oil production in Ogoniland. Rather, they are related to the conduct of few individuals whose action, in our view, require urgent clarification and intervention to preserve the credibility of the dialogue process. Matters requiring urgent clarification. Clarity on status of oil activities in Ogoniland. There are growing apprehension among sections of the Ogoni population that certain oil-related activities may have commenced in part of Ogoniland, while consultation between the federal government and Ogoni stakeholders remain ongoing. The absence of clear information from the leadership of the ODC on this matter has created uncertainty within our communities. In my capacity as the president of Kagote, I have received several representations and expression of concerns from Ogoni communities. Unfortunately, the absence of authoritative information has made it difficult to provide the necessary clarification. We therefore respectfully request that the position regarding the status of oil activities in Ogoniland be clearly communicated to the people in order to prevent misinformation, speculation, and unnecessary tension. Transparency of employment and confidence building opportunities. We understand that as part of confidence building measures, employment opportunities were extended to Ogoni youth through NNPC. This is a commendable initiative by the federal government. However, concerns have risen regarding the selection process, applicable criteria, distribution of the opportunities. Members and stakeholders have not been sufficiently informed about those matters despite requests for clarification. We believe that greater transparency will protect the integrity of this important federal government initiative and ensure that its benefits are seen to be fairly distributed across Ogoniland. Transparency regarding contracts awards. Similar concerns have been expressed regarding contracts reportedly awarded as part of confidence building interventions for Ogoniland. Relevant information regarding the nature and the scope of the intervention, contract values, contracts, applicable process have not been sufficiently communicated to members of the committee and Ogoni people. Greater disclosure within the appropriate governance framework will strengthen accountability, despite speculation and enabling representatives of the Ogoni people to provide accurate information to their respective constituents. Security of Ogoni communities. We remain deeply concerned about incidents of violence and killing reported in some Ogoni communities. We recognize the enormous responsibility carried by the federal government and Nigerian security agencies in protecting communities across the country. We appreciate ongoing effort to address insecurity. Nevertheless, the safety of the Ogoni people must remain an important component of the dialogue concerning the future of oil production in the area. Sustainable economic activities can only flourish in an environment where communities feel secure and protected. We therefore respectfully appeal for strengthening security intervention in affected Ogoni communities along the ongoing dialogue process. Alleged external influence and improper use of the name of the Office of the National Security Advisor. A particular serious concern relates to the current harmonization list in which non-members of the ODCs were smuggled in under the guise that it was a directive of the NSA, whereas the ODC ought to nominate its own team to negotiate with the NSA independently to show transparency in the process. I do not believe that the NSA will take such decision, knowing well that such decision will interfere with the independence of the ODC and transparency of the process. We wish to state clearly that we have no basis to conclude that those actions were authorized by the National Security Advisor or his office unless otherwise confirmed by the NSA. We therefore respectfully call upon the Office of the National Security Advisor to investigate those claims and clarify the position. Such intervention will protect the integrity of the office of the NSA and reassure the Ogoni people that no person is improperly using the authority of that office to advance private or sectional interests among members of the ODC. There are also concerns that relevant information has not always been made available to duly appointed members of the ODC. For the committee to discharge its mandate effectively, members should have reasonable access to information necessary for consultation with feedbacks to the constituencies they represent. Improve information sharing will strengthen collective ownership of the process and reduce the possibilities of misunderstanding or mistrust. Reports, organizations, and feedback. Questions are also arising regarding the persons nominated to participate in the organization of Ogoni position, as well as the content of reports submitted to the federal government and any response received. These are important documents and processes. Appropriate disclosures to members of the ODC will enable them to properly represent their constituencies and communicate the progress of the dialogue to the Ogoni people. We therefore request greater clarity regarding the organization process and appropriate access to relevant reports and feedback. Conduct capable of undermining unity. We are equally concerned about the conduct by certain individuals within the dialogue process, which have resulted in personal attacks, inflammatory statements, and unnecessary divisions among Ogoni stakeholders. The history of Ogoniland teaches us the importance of dialogue, restraint, and unity. Difference of opinions must never be allowed to degenerate into hostility or incitement. We therefore call on all participants in the process to conduct themselves with dignity, mutual respect, and a commitment to the collective interests of the Ogoni people. Attack on members of ODC and security concerns. On several occasions, some members of the ODCs have raised concerns on the official ODC communication platform, in which I consider to be a constructive effort to strengthen the process. Regardless, some of those concerns have been followed by attacks by some members of the ODC, including allegations portraying legitimate requests for transparency as opposition to the federal government is intended to incite Ogoni people against some members of the ODC. Seeking transparency and accountability within the dialogue process should not be categorized as opposition to government. On the contrary, identifying and addressing weaknesses within the process will strengthen the federal government initiative and improve its prospects of achieving a sustainable outcome. Our appeal to the National Security Advisor. Against this background, we respectfully request the intervention of the National Security Advisor to establish the facts surrounding those concerns. We find it difficult to believe that an office of such national importance will authorize individuals to manipulate the composition of Ogoni representation without material information from duly appointed members, or use the name of the NSA to advance interests that are inconsistent with the transparent and inclusive dialogue envisioned by Mr. President. Accordingly, we respectfully request the Office of the National Security Advisor to 1. Investigate allegations that the name and authority of the NSA are being invoked by unauthorized persons in relations to appointment or nominations within the dialogue process. Clarify the procedure for determining Ogoni representation on any organization or negotiation platform. Review concerns regarding information sharing, employment opportunity, and confidence building measures. Strengthen transparency and accountability within ODC process and ensure that no individual or group is permitted to undermine the laudable intentions of the federal government or create unnecessary division among the Ogoni people. We believe that such intervention will strengthen rather than weaken the dialogue process, and we demonstrate that the federal government remains committed to fairness, transparency, and genuine engagement with the Ogoni people. Our commitment to dialogue, peace, and the federal government initiative. As president of Kagote, the apex socio-cultural organization of the Ogoni people, established in 1947 and representing Kana, Dokana, Tai, and Eleme, I have a responsibility to speak when issues arise that could affect the collective interest of our people. This responsibility does not place us in opposition to the federal government, neither are we opposed to constructive discussion concerning the responsible resumption of oil production in Ogoniland. Our position is that any process of such historical importance must be transparent, inclusive, credible, and must command the confidence of both the Ogoni people and the federal government. We must therefore distinguish between the laudable intentions of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration and the Office of the National Security Advisor on one hand, and the action of individuals who may seek to exploit the process, misrepresent government directive, or improperly invoke the authority of senior government officials on the other. Such conducts, where established, should be condemned because it has the potential to undermine the president's reconciliation initiative, damage confidence in the dialogue, and create unnecessary tension between the Ogoni people and a government that has demonstrated a willingness to engage with us. We therefore call on the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribado, CON, to urgently review those concerns, establish the facts, and take appropriate steps to protect the integrity of the dialogue process. We remain committed to constructive engagement, peaceful dialogue, and a mutually beneficial resolution that protects the interests of the Ogoni people while advancing the broader economic and development objective of the federal government of Nigeria. Finally, I reiterate our profound appreciation to His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFRO, for his commitment to the Ogoni people and for creating this historical opportunity for dialogue and reconciliation. It is our sincere desire that the President's good intentions are not undermined by the conduct of few individuals, and that under the leadership and intervention of the National Security Advisor, the process will be restored to the highest standard of transparency, inclusiveness, and credibility.
I had very high hopes that the Ogoni Dialogue Committee would be the saving grace for the Ogoni people because of the caliber of people who were selected. Unfortunately, the committee turned out to be a smokescreen for a few individuals. Many decisions and activities became shrouded in secrecy. For example, as a member of the committee, I do not know up till now whether the committee was funded or not. I have been in many committees during my service years, but this is the first time I am taking part in a committee that has no budget or logistics for its operation. I cannot explain to anybody how the 40 slots that was given by NNPCL as part of confidence building measures prior to the negotiations was distributed among the LGAs. Neither do I know the name of any of the beneficiaries, yet I'm a member of the committee. I'm also a member of the monitoring team for the confidence building projects in Kana local government area. But neither do I know the contractors nor have the scope of work to be monitored. These are but a few examples of the lack of transparency in the operation of the committee. When I requested information on some of the issues raised and demanded for some level of transparency and accountability, I was seriously attacked on the platform and even in the open physical meeting for sacrilege. The worst case scenario is the purported resumption of oil exploration activities in some parts of Ogoniland while the dialogue process is on, and without proper negotiation to the best of my knowledge. I will be doing my people very great disservice if I continue to pretend to be a member of a committee whose activities lack adequate transparency. Since all the internal appeals for a change in our modus operandi have failed, I feel this is the best medium to express my views to the National Security Advisor for immediate intervention if the dialogue process must remain on course. I am very grateful to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who through the Office of the National Security Advisor considered me qualified to be a member of the committee. I want to thank all of you very much. I am Rear Admiral John Nicholas Bagbo, retired. Thank you very much, and God bless us.
Here is an urgent appeal for transparency, justice, and prudence in the Ogoni dialogue process. The resumption of oil activities in Ogoniland must not precede the resolution of the fundamental questions before the Ogoni people. I consider it necessary at this critical juncture to draw the attention of the federal government, the leadership of the Ogoni Dialogue Committee, ODC, the people of Ogoniland, and the Nigerian public to matters of urgent concern regarding the ongoing process for the resumption of oil activities in Ogoniland. I do so not in opposition to the federal government's initiative, not in opposition to the resumption of oil activities in Ogoniland, and certainly not in opposition to the leadership being provided to the process by the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu. On the contrary, I believe that the opportunity presented before us is historic and should be protected. My concern is the manner in which the process is being conducted and in the direction it appears to be moving. I believe that unless and until some of these concerns are urgently addressed, we may inadvertently repeat some of the very mistakes that have produced mistrust, alienation, and conflict in Ogoniland in the past. This is not a call to abandon the process. Let me make my position absolutely clear. I am not opposed to oil resumption in Ogoniland. I recognize that oil production has historically been an important part of Nigeria's economic development, and that the return of responsible oil activities under an arrangement that adequately protects the interests of the Ogoni people could provide opportunities for employment, development, infrastructure, and economic empowerment of the Ogoni people. I also recognize and respect the role of the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, in leading the federal government's effort to bring the various interests together. My concern, therefore, is not whether there should be the dialogue. My concern is whether the dialogue is sufficiently transparent and properly sequenced to produce an outcome that the Ogoni people can genuinely own. The process at the moment appears too secretive. From the outset, there has been a disturbing tendency to conduct matters of profound public consequence in a manner that appears deliberately sub-secreto. The issues under consideration here do not belong to a few individuals sitting around a negotiating table. They concern the land, resources, environmental rights, political future, and economic destiny of an entire people. The people of Ogoniland therefore have a legitimate right to know what is being negotiated in their name and the principles upon which such decisions affecting their future are being reached. My concern has become even more urgent because negotiations are still underway while oil-related activities have already commenced in some parts of Ogoniland, and licenses have reportedly been issued to certain companies before the negotiating process has been concluded. When I questioned this approach on the platform, I was told in substance that after the negotiations were concluded, the companies would subsequently be invited to negotiate equity participation with the Ogoni people. I am deeply concerned by that approach. In equity participation, community ownership, host community benefits, and other fundamental protections if they are intended to be part of the final arrangement, they ought to be established before the principal decisions are taken and not after the fact. There is a fundamental principle at stake here. You cannot conclude a deal today and expect a law enacted tomorrow to retroactively confer rights or obligations upon an agreement that has already been concluded. Laws are generally prospective, not retroactive. The sequence matters. If the Ogoni people are to have fundamental and meaningful participation in the economic benefits arising from the return of oil activities, such participation must be negotiated and secured as part of the process itself. Otherwise, there is a real danger that Ogoniland will eventually be confronted with a fait accompli. Why are we in a hurry? I have repeatedly asked a simple question. It took us 33 years to get to this point. Why must we rush the process now? If the answer is that elections are approaching, then I respectfully submit that this would be an inadequate reason to compromise the quality of an agreement that may affect generations of Ogoni yet to be born. The negotiation is with the Nigerian state. Governments will come and go. Those who constitute governments will change, but Ogoniland will remain. Nigeria will remain. The oil beneath Ogoni, or beyond Ogoni soil, will remain. We therefore have a responsibility to think beyond the electoral calendar and beyond the tenure of particular political office holders. What Ogoni requires is not merely a quick agreement. Ogoni requires the right agreement. The Bori State demand cannot be pushed aside. Perhaps my greatest concern relates also to the manner in which one of the most significant demands expressed by our people during the town hall meetings in all the kingdoms appear to have been treated. The demand for the creation of Bori State was repeatedly and overtly repeatedly by the Ogoni people. That demand cannot merely be another request for a new state. It must be understood against the historical background of Ogoni. It is inseparable from the sacrifices made during the non-violent struggle led by Kenule Sarowewa and other Ogoni leaders. The military occupation that followed, the killing and execution of Ogoni leaders, the destruction of communities, and the enormous suffering inflicted upon our people. It is also inseparable from the contribution of Ogoni oil to the Nigerian economy from the 1930s until the cessation of oil production more than 3 decades ago. For many Ogoni people, therefore, Bori State represents an aspiration for political recognition, justice, and compensation for a people who have paid an extraordinary price in the history of Nigeria's oil development. It is therefore troubling and sufficiently troubling that this demand, which featured prominently in the consultations with the people, has apparently been pushed to the 7th position in the negotiating priorities. I believe this deserves urgent reconsideration. Who determined that a demand so central to the aspirations expressed by the people should be relegated in this manner? The people should not be consulted and then have their principal demands subsequently rearranged according to the preferences of a few negotiators. Quick wins must not create new grievances. I am equally concerned about the manner in which the so-called quick wins or low-hanging fruits have been identified and distributed. If these projects are intended to demonstrate the benefits of the process and rebuild confidence, then their distribution must be transparent, equitable, and demonstrably fair. Yet, to my knowledge, there is nothing situated in Babe Kingdom under this program. Not a school, not a hospital, nor any comparable project. It is not merely a question of one kingdom wanting its share. It raises a larger question about the criteria being used to determine which communities receive what projects and why. A process designed to heal historical grievances must not inadvertently create new ones. For instance, it is difficult to understand how a program intended to demonstrate meaningful intervention in Ogoniland could proceed without including the Rotobane community, the very hometown of late Kensarawiwa, whose name and legacy runs inseparably connected with the Ogoni struggle. The omission is not merely a question of infrastructure. It speaks to the broader question of whether the projects were conceived from a sufficiently comprehensive understanding of Ogoni's history, geography, and developmental aspirations. The same concerns arises with the hospitals reportedly selected for renovation. These are largely existing old health facilities constructed in the past. Renovating such facilities may provide some immediate relief, but it falls considerably short of the kind of modern, properly equipped healthcare infrastructure that the Ogoni people require and deserve at this point in our history. The standard should not simply be to refurbish old ones, but to ask what kind of healthcare facilities are necessary for a modern and economic productive Ogoniland. This is particularly striking when one considers the scale and sophistication of healthcare infrastructure that contemporary institutions and entities, including the NNPC, are capable of establishing. There is also considerable uncertainty surrounding the proposed renovation of selected secondary schools. Although the renovation of some schools was initially included among the proposed interventions, there now appears to be little or no clarity about what has happened to that component. This is deeply troubling because education cannot be treated as an incidental component of development. Indeed, how do you prepare to empower the people economically and socially when there is a consequential neglect of the foundational educational institutions upon which that development must rest? You cannot meaningfully speak of empowering the Ogoni people while leaving their children to receive education in inadequate and deteriorating school environments. Roads, hospitals, and other infrastructure are important, but sustainable empowerment requires investments in human capital development, and human capital begins with primary and secondary education. The concern, therefore, is not that these projects are unnecessary. Rather, my concern is that they appear insufficiently ambitious, insufficiently integrated, and in some instances, uncertain in their implementation. Ogoni needs more than projects that can be presented as quick wins. It needs a coherent developmental framework that connects infrastructure, education, healthcare, environmental restoration, economic opportunity, and the long-term empowerment of our people. My history of engagement with the Ogoni question. Let me add these observations with a particular sense of responsibility, because my engagement with the Ogoni question did not begin with my appointment to the ODC. During the years of military occupation, when access to Ogoniland was severely restricted, and much of what was happening inside our communities was invisible to the outside world, I conducted journalists from the BBC, from the CNN, from the New York Times, through Ogoniland, through bush tracks unknown to the military, enabling them to see the situation from within and tell the story of Ogoni oppression directly from the communities affected. I also, during the process, during those bleak years of the Abacha regime, conducted the Honorable Flora MacDonald, the then Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada, and the Canadian High Commissioner to Nigeria, Mr. Jerry Olson, around Ogoniland, drawing attention to the plight of Ogoni people and facilitated their meetings and interviews with victims of rape, brutality, and other forms of violence. Those engagements helped bring the reality of the Ogoni tragedy to international attention and contributed significantly to the circumstances that eventually led to the resettlement of Ogoni people outside the country. I also assisted the process associated with Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, which contributed to the chain of initiatives that eventually produced the UNEP assessment of Ogoniland and the subsequent establishment of HIPREP, which is now responsible for environmental remediation. I also served as secretary of the Port Harcourt Diocesan Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Committee, established by the late Bishop Alexius Marcosi, with funding support from the European Union to assist the rehabilitation and resettlement of victims of the Ogoni Andoni crisis. I do not count these things to claim exclusive ownership of Ogoni struggles. Far from it. Many Ogoni men and women made sacrifices far greater than mine. Many Nigerians and international friends of Ogoniland also contributed significantly to the struggle. I mention my own modest contributions for just one reason. Having been involved in the Ogoni question through some of its darkest moments, I cannot now remain silent if I genuinely believe that the present process, is moving in a direction that could prejudice the long-standing interests of our people. The Kensarawiwa question. Even during the present process, I considered it necessary to draw the attention of the President to an important unresolved aspect of the historical injustice suffered by the Ogoni people. Addressed a private memorandum to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu through the office of the NSA, drawing attention to the need to address the question of the pardon of Kensarawiwa, an appropriate national honor for the slain Ogoni leaders. I am deeply grateful to the President for responding positively and adequately to that matter. That response demonstrated that where the government is presented with a genuine historical grievance, it can listen and act, and they listened and acted. It is precisely because of that experience that I believe the present condition and concerns should also be heard. This must not become a process for a few business interests. There is a growing concern among many people that the urgency being attached to this process may be driven by interests that go beyond the legitimate framing and objectives of returning oil production to Ogoniland. I deliberately choose my words carefully. I am not accusing any individual of criminal conduct, but the combination of limited transparency, ongoing negotiations, activities already commencing in parts of Ogoniland, licenses reportedly being issued before the conclusion of the negotiations, and the relegation of major demands of our people naturally creates questions that deserve clear answers. After the sacrifices made by the Ogoni people, and after the enormous efforts over decades to bring us to this point, we cannot allow this process to become skewed towards predetermined conclusions that principally serve the interests of a few business-minded individuals. The process must serve Ogoni first. My urgent appeal, therefore, collaborating with my president of Kagote, is to His Excellency, our dear President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to ensure that the historic opportunity before the federal government is not diminished by haste or inadequate consultation. The NSA himself should ensure that the dialogue remains transparent, balanced, and sufficiently inclusive. The leadership of the ODC to open up the process sufficiently to enable the people to understand and interrogate the fundamental issues being negotiated in their name. The Ogoni people and their traditional and community leadership should remain vigilant and ensure that no agreement concerning the future of Ogoniland is concluded without adequate consultation and transparency. I believe it is still possible to correct the course of the process. This is not a call to abandon the process. This is not a call to abandon the negotiations. It is a call to slow down where necessary, open up the process, listen again to the people, and ensure that no irreversible decisions are taken before the fundamental questions are settled. Resumption must not mean surrender. I remain firmly of the view that oil activities can and should resume in Ogoniland. But the resumption must be founded on justice, transparency, environmental responsibility, meaningful participation, and equitable benefit. Resumption must not mean surrender. Development must not become another name for dispossession. Dialogue must not become a mechanism through which decisions are made first and explained to the people afterwards. And quick results must never be allowed to take precedence over durable settlements. The Ogoni people have already paid an enormous price. They have waited for 3 decades. We can wait a little longer to get it right. The oil will still be here. The Nigerian state will still be here. Ogoni will still be here. What we must ensure is that when the oil finally returns to Ogoniland, it returns under an agreement that future generations of our children of Ogoni people will regard not as another betrayal, but as the beginning of a new and just chapter in our history. This is therefore an urgent appeal, not a stop the process, but a get it right. Ogoni deserves justice. Ogoni deserves transparency. Ogoni deserves a voice in decisions about his future. And Ogoni deserves an agreement that will stand the test of history. I remain the Right Reverend Monsignor Pius K, PhD, DSSROS, member Ogoni Dialogue Committee. This 18th day of August 2026. Thank you.